nhìn thấy chiếc cúp của mình. Bây giờ chẳng còn gì có thể ngăn cản họ được nữa. Đây là ván đấu thứ tư và họ đang dẫn trước 2-1. Trụ về nhà chính đầu tiên, trụ bảo vệ nhà chính thứ hai và chiếc cúp vô địch VCS mùa xuân 2022.
This will be the final edited preview of MSI Condensed. I hope you enjoyed this and the other preview videos on emerging region teams, as well as the streams about EGG2, T1, and RNG. If you haven't checked out the others, there's a link to the full playlist in the description. Beginning with Saigon Buffalo, I'd be remiss not to mention that this will be the first major international Riot event where we welcome a member of VCS since the 2019 World Championship. That's right, it has been over 2 years. That said, there is more than a slight asterisk on the Buffalo appearance. They're the only team at the event to not have won their domestic league. They placed second to the stronger performing Gigabyte Marines, who withdrew from the event to attend the SEA games, which are taking place at the same time. Even if many would argue that this SGB team won't show up as technically strong as GAM, they still will represent a bit of the creative and aggressive flavor that fans have come to enjoy from the Vietnamese teams. This team averages a 434 gold lead at 50 minutes with a negative 1.5 CS differential, mostly because they love to win fast or lose fast with a 29-minute average game time. It's also expected that if you want to come away as a fan of some new players on the stage, the Buffalo is a team of faces you'll probably see again, mostly because they're so young. Of the 10 youngest players at MSI, according to the report provided to me by the VCS English broadcast team, 4 of them come from the Saigon Buffaloes. This team isn't particularly nuanced in how they approach the game. They love flex picks and saving counterpick for rising top laner Hazmed, who the VCS English team's caster Carix emphasized to me has a very bright future and high ceiling. He's been praised as the second coming of Zeros, the man who has already entranced many on the international stage. Many SGB drafts lack wave clear and necessitate a lot of early skirmishing potential. The mechanical prowess of support Taki then is what makes the team work. Perhaps in the team's most famous game this season, SGB picked Camille blind and held top lane counterpick to put Taki on Camille support and grant Hazmed Fane into Mordekaiser. The overall draft looked pretty bad into what their opponents had to offer with Victor Zaya, a lot of all-in and very little wave clear to stall out for picks. But really smart trigger pull and intelligent picks into global collapse made it work. SGB also had good lane assignments to emphasize that they knew what they were doing with their composition. I'd more or less always rather watch this team play creative style pick comps because they understand fast plays in side lane and how to make short windows work. When they are forced to coordinate intelligently around the map with more traditional teamfight compositions, their planning can't really be called advanced, so they're better off brute forcing surprise skirmishes and confusing their opponents in drafts that might not seem favorable to the traditional audience. Carix has SGB coming out in their group in the matchup against Detonation Focus Me. Let me know what you think in the comments.
斩杀被留住了 ，Koala 没有办法回到自己的温泉，利用自己的护盾不断 pop， 希望不要被斩杀，但斩杀来了 ，Koala 直接倒地，剩下的成员开始准备来拆主堡，我们准备恭喜2022的王者 PSG 3-2打败 CFO， 前往 MSI 拿下 MSI 的门票，让我们恭喜 PSG。
That brings us to PSG Talon. If you remember watching PSG in the previous years, you probably think of them as aggressive shoo-ins for the semifinals, but a lot has changed about PCS since 2021. In particular, as PCS English caster Clement Chu told me, a lot of the more iconic members of PCS teams from 2021 World Championship have gone to the LPL or LCS like River, Maple, and Doggo. The loss of the first two in particular stings for PSG Talon because it's hard to argue that the new mid-jungle duo of PSG, Bei and Juhan, amply fit the shoes of their predecessors. Mid-jungle 2v2 skirmishing was once a strength of PSG, it is now a liability. Of course, that doesn't mean there isn't anything to love about PSG. They might not have dominantly taken over their region. In fact, they had to fight back from the lower bracket and take revenge against CTBC Flying Oyster in a 5-game grand final, but they have a strong AD carry and powerful team fighting like so many other teams at MSI. Aside from Unified and Kaiwing being a bottom lane of particular distinction within the context of MSI teams, in fact, I would argue that Unified spacing and general laning performances place him above some more familiar ADCs to an English audience like G2's Flackhead. PSG also use more advanced macro to get an edge over most of their regional opposition. While they avoid a lot of skirmish-focused drafts, they opt into lane swaps frequently around the Rift Herald timer, and know how to make the swap go their way regardless of whether they get the Rift Herald or not. They funnel a significant amount of plates into Unified so that he can pose a threat in fights later, and usually get advantages for him in this way. The change in ADC meta might have a big impact on this strategy, but it's still worth noting. It also seemed like PSG Talon were the only team in PCS that knew wave timers for setting up Drakes properly, namely pushing out top wave about a minute to 45 seconds before Drake spawn, to force the opponents to choose between catching that wave or fighting the dragon. In a lot of the games they won, they did so playing Aphelios and forcing the enemy team to face check into the Drake or some other neutral by getting to it first, which made it really funny when they lost the majority of games by making the same mistake as their opponents in those matches. In their first match of the season against Beyond Gaming, for example, which is a team that's actually known more for their side laning than teamfighting, despite the renowned former AD carry Doggo, was a loss for PSG because they didn't respond well when playing against a team that also understood basic wave timers around neutrals. I actually don't think PSG will do that well this MSI, but as PCS casters Clement Chu and PiraTechnics said, this is a good litmus test for PCS as a region. MSI will give some indication of the blow that losing a lot of star talent dealt to them as a whole. That's it for this video series preview on MSI Emerging Region and I guess Pool 2 teams, since this is SGB and PSG, and I'm not quite sure how they're defined in the ecosystem. There won't be a power ranking at the end of this video because the full power ranking will be on the Megalist stream, which if it hasn't been cut and uploaded to YouTube already, it will be shortly. Thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you around for more MSI content. Best of luck to everyone competing.